Good morning. It's another Wesley Wednesday with Pastor Dave. The past 2 weeks I have been focused on some of the theological controversies that the early Methodists faced that brought about some division and splits within the church. I will get back to those discussions next week, but today I want to take sort of a side road. As you know, Sunday is Halloween, so it may be a good time for a ghost story, especially if it has anything to do with John and Charles Wesley. Now you may ask how a ghost story can fit in with the Wesley devotion. Well, as my good friend Clarence Brown would say, I'm glad you asked that question. Did you know that the Wesley family had a very active ghost in the Epworth parsonage? While John Wesley was off at Oxford, strange things began to happen back home. Footsteps were heard in the night, coming up and down the stairs. Loud bangings occurred and knocking on doors. A noise like a chain being dragged startled everyone in the house. The family named the ghost Old Jeffrey after a previous occupant of the parsonage who had died there. The family grew accustomed to Old Jeffrey, even fond of him, until one day all strange occurrences ceased as quickly as it had begun. Almost every member of the Wesley household wrote letters or made journal entries about Old Jeffrey, even years after the commotion ended. When John would write home, he would often ask, "How was Old Jeffrey doing?" If you search the topic online, you will find a number of posts about this series of paranormal events. Today, the haunting of the old rectory at Epworth is considered one of the most famous ghost stories in British history. Recently, I was looking in our church library at Peakland, and I found a book on Susana Wesley, but written by Marion Fields, that included a chapter on Old Jeffrey. Shane Renoir, in an article for Ministry Matters, writes, "The first people in the household to encounter the spirit were two servants who heard Jeffrey's groaning and knocking in the dining room. The sounds then continued up to the servants' quarters, but their tales were dismissed as rubbish. Soon, however, the younger girls in the family began hearing the racket too. There were sounds of footsteps, rattling chains, horns being blown, and wood being sawed. There were also accounts of moving furniture and dishes. Before long, everyone in the house, except their father Samuel, was experiencing the phenomenon. He rebuked the family and the servants for perpetrating such tales. Samuel insisted that it was probably the townfolk who didn't like his views of the king, or boyfriends of his older daughters sneaking into the house and were up to no good. Susana was so concerned that Jeffrey was going to disturb her evening prayers that she told the ghost she didn't want to be interrupted between 5 and 6 p.m., and she never was. The whole family, as well as a neighboring clergyman, saw or heard it, and no one could find evidence of a hoax. Though initially skeptical, Susana wrote to John that she became entirely convinced that it was beyond the power of any human creature to make such strange and various noises. Then Samuel Wesley began having his own encounter with Old Jeffrey. One night, after being awakened by the knocking, Reverend Wesley, after trying to figure out where the noises were coming from, issued the spirit a challenge. "Thou deaf and dumb devil," he shouted, "why does thou frighten these children? Come to me. Come to my study. I'm a man." Old Jeffrey responded that evening with knocking on the walls wherever Samuel went in the house, and the following evening by slamming the door of Samuel's study forcefully just as the Reverend was opening it. Samuel also claimed to feel someone pressing on his chest later while he was lying in bed. In response, Samuel bought a large, scary dog to protect the family. But once the dog confronted the unknown intruder, the dog cowered in fear, hiding under a table, and whimpered every time the sounds of Jeffrey filled the house. Susana wrote in her journal, "One night it made such a noise in the room over our heads, it was as if several people were walking, then running up and down the stairs, and was so outrageous that we thought the children would be frightened. So your father and I rose and went down in the dark to light a candle. Just as we came to the bottom of the stairs, having hold of each other, On my side there seemed as if someone had emptied a bag of money at my feet, and on his as if all the bottles under the stairs, which were many, had been dashed into 1,000 pieces. All this fascinated John Wesley, who tried his best to explain how these things could happen. I have visited the Epworth parsonage on 3 occasions and must tell you that it's a strange feeling to walk up in the attic, which is known as Jeffrey's chambers, and hear the stories of old Jeffrey. The most popular question, I'm told, that is asked to tour guides is, have you experienced anything unexplained since working here? To which they respond with a wink of the eye that old Jeffrey is pretty much a thing of the past. Well, happy Halloween, have a great day, and I'll be back next Wednesday.